Hello and welcome to the video version of my journal. I'm Stephanie Rivers. Come on in, kings and queens, and welcome to the conversation. You're watching me. I'm Stephanie Rivers on my journal is on several platforms. You might be watching me on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or even LinkedIn. On whatever platform, we want to welcome you to the conversation. If you are new to the conversation, then I'm sure they're going to hear something and learn something that you like. I'm going to ask you to share it and then subscribe so that when I post new videos, you will be the first to know. And if you are returning to the conversation, I want to welcome you. Come on in for this quick conversation. I have about 19 minutes. I normally don't talk too long, but I have even less time today to share with you. And of course, what most people are talking about is the death of YouTuber extraordinaire Kevin Samuels. And so, of course, when I heard about the death of Kevin Samuels, I assumed it was an internet hoax. And I thought I'll just give it a few hours before I actually start reacting in any way, because surely in that time, in a few hours, he will go live and he will confirm that it is a hoax, and then we can move on with our lives. And so later on that night is when a lot of other bloggers started getting access to the police report that explained more about Kevin Samuels' life. And let me just pause right here and say some of y'all need some FBI certification, okay? Because some of y'all can get down to the bottom of some stuff in record time, okay? And so I applaud you for that. So that's how I learned through a friend of mine, and then I did some research, and then later on that night, and realized that it was true. So, of course, my condolences go out to the family of Kevin Samuels, but it turns out his family and he were not really that close, and that's based on my summation, and I will explain that to you. Samuels grew up in um, Oklahoma, and he is survived by his mother, at least one ex-wife, and at least two kids. And his mother sadly learned about his death through social media. So I find it ironic that Samuels, who grew up as an only child like I did, and I make it a point to stay in contact with my mother as much as possible, especially we try to take trips together. I try to call her at least every couple of days. And he is a only child. I find it ironic that he did not keep in touch with his mom, or at least that his mom had to find out about his death via social media. And so Samuels often accused Black women of being so emotionally detached and physically unhealthy, making us unattractive to men, that he predicted that most of us who were over 35 and were not married, because our standards were so high, that we would be the ones to die alone. And it turns out that had it not been for the one night stand that he picked up the night before, according to her own testimony, that who just happened to be in his apartment when he collapsed, that Samuels would have been the one who died alone. And there's no telling how long it would have been for somebody to realize that something was wrong with him. Now, just in case you don't know who Kevin Samuels is, or you never heard of him, there's a picture of Kevin Samuels. He had over 1 million followers on YouTube and other social platforms. And that is who we are talking about today. And I want to pose the question, was Kevin Samuels a hypocrite? Did he die doing exhibiting behavior that he criticize other people for having. And here's why I say that. You see, I don't advocate just jumping into a relationship or a marriage just to have a warm body next to you in case you need somebody to call um, 911 or to perform CPR. Or I don't advocate jumping into a marriage because you might need somebody to push your wheelchair around, Pastor Noel Jones. But it seems that some of the behavior that Kevin Samuels showed in the last hours of his life was the same behavior that he criticized in some Black women. And that would be one, acting like you're low hanging fruit so that anybody who wants a squeeze can take one. How else would you end up in a alone out on the town, bring home a random stranger and spend the night with her? That's a low hanging fruit scenario if I've ever heard of one. But he criticizes women for doing that. And that also, another thing that he criticized mostly Black women for is leading with their assets, okay? Then wondering why high value men just want to sleep with you and have no use for you after that. So I'm sure that Kevin Samuels considered himself to be a high value man, yet he found himself in the company of a woman that he had just met. Okay. So he meets this woman and liked what he saw. I guess she liked what she saw, liked the conversation. He invited her home to get some of that cake, no doubt, and she accepted. And I doubt that he considered her to be Mrs. Right, and I doubt she considered him to be Mrs. Right. They considered each other probably to be Mr. and Ms. Right now, because if you really are feeling someone and you see that you want to know more about who they are as a person, getting in the draws is not the first thing that you want to do, because you are apprehensive about whether or not that's going to run that person off and in the relationship. So I doubt that they really were feeling each other beyond being Mr. and Mrs. Right now. But he made it a point to criticize women for doing that, for having that activity. And the kicker is criticizing women who take time to get an education and build a career instead of sitting around waiting for a man to notice them and like them enough to ask them for their hand in marriage. When it turns out the one night stand that he died on top of just happened to be a nurse who was instrumental in trying to save his life. She knew about defibrillators. She knew how to perform CPR. You're not going to get that with just some random person. So it just so happened that he fell asleep. He fell dead, fell unconscious on top of a nurse, and that was his best chance of getting his life saved. How ironic. So if you haven't already, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so when I post new videos, you'll be the first to know. Now, I didn't make it a point to keep up with every one of Kevin's videos. So I know some of you who are like, a bunch of his followers are going to have something to say about what I just said. And you know what? That's okay. I don't feel like I was his target market. Everybody has a target market. I wasn't his, but I was aware of him, did look at some of the videos, and I did understand his point of view on some things. Yet, even in death, Kevin Samuels gave validation to a few things, and here they are. Just because a person looks a certain way, looks weight appropriate, looks good in a suit, has nice art on the wall, can carry a good conversation, um, looks good, smells good, doesn't mean that they're not tore up from the floor up on the inside, okay? And they might be one burrito away from a heart attack, okay? It doesn't mean that. So just because we need to quit being so superficial and thinking just because the exterior is on and popping, that there's not something going on underneath. And I'll say the converse of that would be, just because the outside doesn't meet your standards, doesn't that also doesn't um shouldn't keep you from wanting to know more about that person. Um, yeah, people look at a bald head and like, oh hell no, hell no. And you know what? That's okay too, because we all have our preferences. But just because it's not your preference doesn't mean that's not somebody else's preference, or somebody, or the value is not there. So there's the reverse of that. So we're talking about, was Kevin Samuels a hypocrite in the way he lived because of the way that he died? Secondly, well, before I go on, make sure it's always important to eat healthy, have regular exercise, and have periodic medical preventative maintenance, so that you can know what's going on the inside and the outside. So, secondly, his death is another confirmation that it's important to walk the walk of the talk that you talk. If you preaching something, live that thing, because what comes to light, what goes on in the dark will eventually come to light. Picking up random ass people at a bar or a restaurant and then bringing them home is dangerous in so many ways. And it's reckless. And what looks good to you ain't necessarily good for you. Lakeside told us 40 years ago, the freaks come out at night. Okay. That movie, Looking for Mr. Goodbar, told us you can end up with a killer in your bed and it's too late when you realize it. Okay. Have that movie with Kadeem Hardison, by Temptation, Death by Temptation. That was, he was a bunch of people saw this pretty lady. She was beautiful, in fact, at a bar, end up taking her home. Turns out she was like the devil. She was Satan. She was just all prettied up. And then when she got you alone and vulnerable, she pounced on him and killed him. So, yeah, those are some examples of why. And I know those are just movies, but those movies are examples, and songs are examples of why you just don't pick up people and bring them home, because you don't know what you're dealing with. Okay. And lastly, it's important to stay connected to family, because if nothing else, you don't want your last hour, your last minutes on in life to be dependent on some random ass person that you brought to the house to do right by you. We still don't know what happened in the situation. All we know is apparently he brought home this woman they had just met, and she said the next morning he started talking about chest pains and collapse on top of her. Okay. So yeah, we don't want our last day, our last minutes to be at the um hoping somebody has mercy on us and treats us with dignity. Okay. At the very least, this tells me we all need to put a note in our wallet that says to the cops and or the people at the hospital or whoever finds our lifeless body, that if you find me incapacitated, please call my mama. Here's her number. Call my sister, call my brother, call somebody, my wife, my husband, somebody, and let them know where I am. Because the last thing I want to do is have my mother to find out about my death on social media. She don't even really go to social media. She's 70 something years old. So I could be dead a long time waiting for my mama to figure it out on social media. That's why, not that's why, but in addition to just loving her and appreciating what she has done for me, and continues to be in my life, and we celebrate each other. That's why I keep up with my mother. That's why I check with her to make sure she's okay, make sure she ain't in pain, overextended pain for hours or days at a time without hearing from me. And when I don't hear from her, she has family that I can call and say, check on my mother, please, and make sure that she is fine. So these are the reasons why you need to keep people in your life and build relationships. And judging from the last 24 hours of Kevin Samuel's life, the life that he criticized others for having is the one that he was living, and that ain't good. So don't be like that. And that's all I have to say about it. To find out more about the things that I care about, you can go to the written version of my journal. That's at eurweb.com. Thanks. Have a super day and treat your mama nice. Happy Mother's Day.